the elevator doors open and my mom literally darts out and like runs back to the nurse's station. And she said when she got there, one of the ladies that she worked with, Linda, that had been there like 15 years before my mom even started, she was like, "What is wrong with you?" And she said, there was somebody in the elevator with me. And she's like, "But there wasn't anybody in the elevator with me." And she said, "Oh, you just met Nora."
Healthcare horrors. Murder. Welcome back to another episode of Healthcare Horrors. I am Ashley, a brand specialist here at Atlas. And in the last episode, we had previous travel nurse Donna Chisler on, and she talked about some of her own spooky, paranormal, or unexplained experiences at different hospitals that she was working at. Not just one hospital, but a few different stories from a few different places that primarily took place in Illinois. So after she told us her stories, we actually kept it in Illinois and we talked about the McPike Mansion and all of the history around Alton, Illinois. So super cool. Check it out. Today I have another new co-host. Do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Jessica. I am an Atlas recruiter here in our Allied department. I'm a newbie on the team, but absolutely loving it so far and excited to hop on the podcast and share some spooky experiences myself.
Yeah, welcome. Do you want to jump into their stories and what we're going to talk about, or do you want to hold those till the end?
We can jump in actually to the spooky, unexplained stories for sure to kick us off.
Yes, let's do it.
So I think we will start with my mom's story because hers has like the most detail. Like she actually had what she calls an encounter. And my mom is very like, she doesn't really want to get into like ghost stories and stuff. She's like, "Oh, I don't believe in that." But when she had just started working, she was a new nurse it was Hutchinson Hospital at the time. She was she did night shift, like most of the time, just being a new nurse. That's kind of where you get put. So she was on nights and they would go and get the plates when they would have new patients come in. So she's like, it's like metal plates we would go down and get for them to get them set up when they were being admitted to the hospital. So the ER called, notified her that there was a patient. And so she was like running down to get the plates. And the shortcut to get to the ER from where she was working in med-surg was through Post Hospital, which is the old Civil War portion of the hospital. And it's still there. They've just added on different departments around there. So she said like she's taken this journey many times to go down, but that was just the shortcut. And there had always been stories of a Civil War nurse that still roams the hospital. But my mom had never had any encounters with it, like kind of thought everybody was just pulling her leg and trying to scare her a little bit. So she said it's like 3:00 in the morning and she's going through the hospital. She has zero issues getting down to the ER. She gets the plates and she's back on her journey. And she said as she goes to step into the elevator that's in the post portion of the hospital, she said it was cold, like freezing cold. And she got in and she said like it almost felt foggy to her. And she said she felt like she was a little crazy, but like just kind of hazy. And she says she hit 3 on the elevator and the doors closed. And she said she's standing there holding the plate, staring at like the stainless steel. So it's not like mirrored, but you could see reflections. And she said standing behind her was a tall woman, the navy cloak and a nurse's hat with the band, like the old military style like band around the top of the hat. And she literally like turned around expecting to see somebody and there was nobody there. And so she turns back around and she said like the woman's reflection is still in the stainless steel. Like she can still see her. And she said like as she starts to like reach her hand out, the elevator doors open and my mom literally darts out and like runs back to the nurse's station. And she said when she got there, one of the ladies that she worked with, Linda, that had been there like 15 years before my mom even started, she was like, "What is wrong with you?" And she said, there was somebody in the elevator with me. And she's like, "But there wasn't anybody in the elevator with me." And she said, "Oh, you just met Nora." And my mom was like, "Do what?" Like she thought they had made up all these stories, but Nurse Nora was a Civil War nurse at the post hospital. There are actually photographs of her that I'll have to see if they can dig up. They did have them in the museum from like the Civil War. She is really tall. And that was her exact outfit, and multiple people have seen her. So like if you do any research or you look up post hospital, you can type in Nurse Nora, and there are tons of stories. They all describe her the exact same way. That was just kind of like the running thing is like, "Oh, it's Nurse Nora." And so my mom said like she didn't feel like afraid of her. Like it wasn't like she was going to hurt her, but she said it was just like so unsettling to have somebody in the elevator, but really no one in the elevator with you.
Well, yeah, you're by yourself in an enclosed space and you see someone, at least from what I've come to understand, Nora is very nice. So
yes. Yeah. Apparently Nora has offered like residents drinks and stuff. Like that's another thing they have. Like Nora goes around passing out drinks, which maybe that was something that she did when she was in the hospital. My grandmother said that like Nora always walked the halls with her, and she said like, so obviously they wore tennis shoes or, you know, whatever when they were nursing, but I don't know what shoes Nora would have worn, but they said like her feet had a very specific sound. And so like when your tennis shoes or your sneakers are not really clicking on the floor, her feet would almost click. And so my grandmother said like she had to walk down the hallway. So this is the hallway that you would go down in the post hospital to get to the pharmacy. And my grandmother would go down and pick up meds a lot and bring them back up to her department. And she said like the first few times it literally terrified her, because she said not only did you hear her feet and like they didn't match your, like you could even like change up your footsteps and those footsteps never changed. But she would like walk with you down the hall, and she said like very closely, like she said you'd almost feel like if you turn, like you were going to bump into her, like very close. And so she said like she eventually got to where, you know, walk the halls and hear Nora. But she said one night she was leaving and she worked late, but not the late shifts like my mom did. So she said it was like 11:30 and the place where she parked was like really far off from the hospital, but sometimes you didn't get those close parking spots and you had to park way out, kind of like in the back side of the lot, and it was gravel. And she said as she was walking to her car, it was dark, you couldn't see really well, like she was absolutely terrified, which my grandmother is the biggest scaredy cat I think I've ever met. And she said like she could hear footsteps walking in the gravel with her. And she said like, but it wasn't footsteps like hurried to get her, just walking with her. And she said as soon as she got to her car, there was a man standing in front of her car, like an actual person standing in front of her car. And she said she managed to get her door unlocked and jumped in and locked the door. And she said she sat there thinking thanking Nora for walking her to her car, because there was somebody out in the parking lot. And she said like, I truly feel like she was walking to protect me because I wasn't alone out in the parking lot. So she said like, the gravel footsteps were not after her. They were just walking with her to get her safely to her vehicle.
So the man in front of her car was a real person,
you
don't know what their intentions were.
No.
Oh my gosh.
But Nora got her safely to her car, she said.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so should we jump into some of the history of the hospital then?
Sure, absolutely.
So the hospital that you are specifically talking about, that we're talking about today, is the U.S. Army Post Hospital at Fort Oglethorpe, Georgia.
Yes, you said
And
it correctly.
yeah, and I feel like we're actually gonna give more of a history lesson, if anything, because there wasn't a whole bunch of history just on the hospital since it's on a fort. So we're gonna kind of talk about the history of the fort and the surrounding area. So I will preface the establishment of the fort with the American Civil War. We're just going to start there really quick. So the American Civil War was between 1861 and 1865. Yeah, we're going to also have a geography lesson really quick. So there's Chickamauga, which is in like northwestern Georgia. And then in Tennessee, there's an area called Chattanooga. So that's in southern Tennessee. And then the Fort Oglethorpe is right in the middle. It's like super close to the border, closer to Chickamauga. But that's where a lot of the battles happened during the Civil War. And then the fort's like right in the middle.
Go to the Chickamauga Battlefield as you drive through there. You'll pass the hospital, but there are tons of like monuments. There's tons of creepy stories in the battlefield as well. There's lots of urban legends out there. That's a fun little topic too to research. But yes, you do have to go through the Chickamauga Battlefield, which was won by us, which is why we have all the things up and all of the little statues and stuff, but it is on your way to the hospital. It's almost like you're kind of smack in the middle on both sides.
All right, so we'll fast forward and we'll get into the fort. At the time, the railroad is also running through that part of town, so that automatically makes it a hot spot. It's easy to get to. It's easy to get supplies. Before the fort was officially named and commissioned, it was known as Camp Thomas in 1898, and that's where a lot of the troops would go for training. In 1904, once the fort was completed, it was officially named Fort Oglethorpe after Georgia's first British governor, James Edward Oglethorpe. All right, so many of the buildings, including the hospital, wore classic Renaissance Revival style architecture. I usually like to dive down the architecture rabbit hole, but I didn't this time. So I'm not sure of the name of the person who even designed the buildings and stuff.
I will say that like the building is still standing. And so you can absolutely still see they've done a really good job. Like I said, it was attached to the hospital, so it became doctor's offices. It is vacant-ish now. But just learning that it has been donated to the battlefield, so it will be preserved. And I'm hoping that they eventually like open it up for tours and different stuff, because I think Nora's probably still hanging out in the hospital.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of paranormal investigators that would love to get in there.
Dying to get in there. Like if you even like type it in now, like so many like, who do I reach out to get a night in the hospital? I'm like, I don't know that I would want a whole night. Just let me walk through a few hours. Don't leave me in there all night.
So the building is white now. I think I saw a picture when it was first built. It was just plain brick colored. Do you know if that's accurate?
I believe so. I think it's just been painted as it's aged, just to kind of keep it and to distinguish it from the rest of the hospital, because being from this area and anything that has to do with the battlefield, the Civil War, Chickamauga, like we have a huge town, like all the things are so predominant and still like important. So they try to keep, people drive from like hours away just to come walk through the battlefield. So I think that was also done. So the people who are coming to like explore the history and learn about it, there are plaques outside of the location. It really differentiated it from the rest of the hospital to always have it just look slightly different.
Okay, gotcha. Makes sense. Help it stand out a little bit. All right, so let's get into World War I a little bit. So the United States didn't jump into World War I until 1917. They jumped in a little late. And once the U.S. declared war on Germany, there was an internment camp started at Fort Oglethorpe. Anyone who was German was put into this camp, whether you were actually from Germany or if you were a German American living in the US, or even if there were Germans like on merchant ships, you were considered the enemy, so you were put into an internment camp. The war ended in 1918, but prisoners weren't technically released till 1920, so you weren't there long, but living conditions weren't the greatest. So it probably felt like an eternity to them. 4,000 German prisoners of war and civilians were held there, and there was eventually a tuberculosis and influenza outbreak. And then once prisoners were released, some of them were actually transferred to the St. Elizabeth's Asylum for the Insane in Washington, D.C. After World War I, and the camp was closed and everything, the war is over, it actually became training grounds for the Women's Army Corps. So that's kind of cool. And then fast forward to World War II, it did become a place where there was another internment camp for prisoners of war. There's also all this training going on. I completely forgot to talk about the training. They started doing super intense training on trench warfare. There was some techniques with planes, and then they introduced tanks and how to operate tanks there as well. All right. Do you have anything to add on any of the wars?
No, but I will say, like, where they did a lot of their training, a lot of that area is still there. And it's sort of, so I really wish we had like a picture, like a good picture that I could just like zip up with a drone really quick and snap. So you could see like modern day, it has changed a little bit over the years, but the Fort Oglethorpe Recreation Association has their ball fields almost right next to the hospital. And there are still like super old homes that have been there for decades. I mean, like old homes still line the roads, but it kind of makes a big loop. And as you come out of the park, you can come straight out and then like take a left into Fort Oglethorpe, or you can continue straight into the battlefield and hit into Ringgold. But if you kind of stay where the hospital's located, they've put the ball fields in, but they still have some military buildings over there. And they did a lot of their, I guess, trainings in these big fields that are still fields. Like, I mean, there's ball fields over there now on one side, but the other side is still open. So now they do, or it's been years because I haven't really gone out and done all the things, but they used to do fireworks and different things and use those big open fields, but they were training fields. So they do have special monuments and markers, and they have like an old plane that was flown that you can still go and see. And I don't know if the whole tank is there. There used to be part of a tank over there that you could see.
Let's get into some of the hauntings of the battlefields. So I did, when I was doing some research, I found the Common Mystics podcast, and I guess the hosts are psychic sisters, and they stumbled onto the fort and into that area of Georgia, and they were just kind of talking about the different things that they sensed or that they were picking up on, you know, not really knowing the history of where they were at, they were just like, whoa, like there's a lot of death. There's a lot of sadness and grief here. Something definitely happened. And there's been reports of a lady in white seen on the Chickamauga Battlefield, and she is believed to be searching for her dead husband who died in combat. One of the locals, well, a lot of the locals have reported seeing her. One of the guys that reported seeing her, his name is Graham Thompson. He actually reported seeing her when he was 8 years old, and she was standing in the woods. There have also been reports of the sound of drums on the battlefield, so I would imagine marching snare drums are heard. Have you ever heard any drums out there?
So I haven't heard drums. Back in high school, me and my friends thought we were going to be like really brave and go out there at night, which is actually not allowed. The park is closed after dark. Rightfully so. There's a lot of things that go on, but we decided, so a friend of mine lived right outside the battlefield, and if you just kind of went down her road, you could easily get in. And so we did that because we were tough, and she was in her convertible. So we had like 10 kids piled in this convertible car, just creeping down the battlefield, and we parked and got out. And we were going to walk around, and, like you can hear screams at night, like real people, not real people. I don't know, but you definitely hear screams in the battlefield. We actually walked up on, I don't want to like make assumptions, all of these people in these long black cloaks, like over their head, all around, and they were like gathering in a circle. That's when we called it quits, and we decided we're not as brave as we thought we were. And so we hopped back in the car and left before we got in trouble. But apparently that actually happens a lot. Like people go and do seances and try to speak to the dead or hear from people who passed in the battlefield, because there are so many people that like lost their lives. And like you said, it was one of the bloodiest battles that we have recorded. So it doesn't surprise me that people show up to do that. It's definitely a little eerie when you're thinking like, you're big and tough and you're going to go show this battlefield. There's really nothing going on in here. But yeah, you definitely do hear noises right by the tower, which they have now put like bars and stuff up, because apparently if you do some research on that, people would jump off of the tower. So there's definitely like, you can feel some stuff when you're in the tower. It's definitely not all upbeat and happy when you're over there. So the lady in white, though, has been, I've heard that my whole life growing up in Chickamauga. And like she searches. So she's not just in like one area, like she searches the battlefield.
Have you ever seen green lights or a pair of glowing green eyes out there?
Green eyes. You can see green eyes a lot. We have always like just said, it's just a deer. Like you're just catching the replay. It doesn't really always fit depending on where you see it, but you definitely can see green eyes. Sometimes in a field. So like there is one particular place where I know that we've probably seen this like 2 or 3 times. But you can also see green eyes in other parts of the battlefield as well. And so that was always my thing, to not like be freaked out as a kid. Was, oh, it's just a deer. But then you read all the stories about green eyes and all the other people that are seeing green eyes. And I'm like, technically to see the deer's eyes like that, your headlights would have to shine and reflect off of the deer. And that doesn't always happen when your headlights are one direction and you see glowing eyes in another direction. But you know, it helps you sleep at night.
But yeah, whatever helps you get through it. Some of the stories that I saw were that whatever it was that had these glowing green eyes, it was too big to be, or too tall to be a human, or too tall to be a deer. So I don't know. There might be something kind of dark lurking around out there.
There are a lot of people that will still see Confederate soldiers. Like like standing like full on light blue, like you can see their whole uniform standing out there. But in those old houses that I was telling you, like that are kind of near the ball fields, those have gone up for sale here and there throughout the years. I mean, they're massive houses. Like you could probably move your whole family into these houses. They were almost like plantation style. Like driving through there, you can see people in the upper windows, normally like older women, that will have like their hair pulled back, and it looks very like old fashioned, I guess, not how you would see someone styled today. And then if you like drive around that house, it would be one of the abandoned homes or the empty houses, or one that was up for sale, but no one should be living in it. But yet you could still see people in those windows. So
yeah. All right. So let's get back to the hospital a little bit. So we've already talked about Nora. She's the most famous ghost. She's the celebrity of the post hospital. Staff have reported doors being opened and closed. It sounds like someone else is walking around. Other than Nora, though, I don't know of any other ghosts. At least there's no other like specific named ghosts. But
so I don't think there are specifics. There was apparently tale of like an animal that used to be in the hospital, like cat, I believe, that used to be in the hospital. And I guess like that was allowed. I don't know. I know nowadays, like you wouldn't have a cat in a hospital, but this cat would literally like lay on the foot of someone's bed, and then that person would pass. And so there is a nursing home. It was Parkside Nursing Home, and it was part of Hutchinson. It's still there. It's just a little, it's almost like behind the hospital, but you have to kind of drive around the block to get to it. And they had a cat that everyone joked had to be a descendant from the old cat, because even when my mom worked there, if like this cat would go into certain rooms and lay at the foot of the bed, and within 2 or 3 days, that person would pass away. And it was so predominant that they started watching like what room that cat went into, so that they could kind of be on alert. And so I don't know if there's, which obviously animals have like a different sense than we do, and they kind of know things like that. But that's just always kind of been the thing that was said, like it was the death cat, like it knew who was going next and had to be a descendant from one of the cats that used to be at the old post hospital, because those stories would go around then as well.
It's interesting you bring that up. Okay, I feel like, so this is the third podcast for the October season, and I feel like so far every episode has been some sort of callback to like Stephen King books, because Rich and I talked about the Stanley Hotel, and then we were talking about Dr. Sleep. And I don't know if you've seen Dr. Sleep or read the book, but there's a cat at the old people's home, and whenever the cat in the book or in the story would go lay on someone's bed, that meant that they were going to pass away. And then in the last episode, we were talking about this because Donna, one of her patients, mentioned seeing a little boy with a dog in the hallway. And whenever a patient said they were seeing a little boy and a dog, like, why is there a dog in the hospital? That was usually a sign that they were going to pass. So yeah, something with animals and hospitals and animal signs is interesting.
Yes.
I thought I read somewhere that it was eventually turned into apartments, because in 1946, after World War II, the fort was decommissioned as military surplus. So everything was just kind of given or sold to the public. So yeah, a lot of people could live in those homes. So yeah, I thought the hospital was used as apartments, but you said no. it's actually still kind of a part of the current hospital campus, and there are apartments near it.
Yes.
So
there are apartments near. The hospital is still there. Like I said, it's probably been 20 years. I'm a lot older than I think I am. I have to remind myself that a lot more time has passed. It's like last year wasn't 2000 actually. So
no.
But they used it as doctor's offices. Like my grandmother's doctor was actually in the old post portion of the hospital. And it's also like different. They've left some of the original stuff in there. So like obviously things have had to be renovated and updated, but they have tried to keep it because it is very historical, true to what they could, obviously to some extent, but you definitely can just tell and feel a difference in there. Like when I would go into the doctor's office with her, it feels a little off. And they would still say, you know, like doors would close and open or things. And like people do joke like, oh, it's just Nora. Like she's still just there hanging out. It's not anything now. I think it just says that it's maintenance for the hospital because there are still entrances into the main hospital. So the last time we even were up there, there was a chain around the front door. So like public can't access that, but you could still access it from the hospital and come in. So I'm guessing like storage, maintenance type stuff now. But yes, it was doctor's offices for a brief period. And then it was a shortcut for everybody to get from different locations of the hospital, just cut through post and get creeped out.
Yeah, the fact that it was kind of nurses like still had access to it and it wasn't that long ago that it was closed up makes so much more sense.
Which I'll say that was when my mom first started there, that was more than 30 years ago. So,
okay.
And she was a new nurse. Like I said, Linda had worked there, I know 15 years prior to my mom working there. And so they had Nora encounters multiple times that they would, and like I said, my mom thought like they were just trying to scare her being a new nurse and having to work nights. But she said everybody talked about it. And I know, so then Hutchison did home health and that was put across from the hospital. So like everything kind of stayed within that block, but they opened a home health agency that my mom and grandmother ended up going to work for. And that was a new building. So not associated with the post or anything. But when you would go and like my mom would draw labs on patients and different things, you still had to take them to the lab at the hospital and you had to park down. You were still really close to the old part of the hospital. So like when we say the old part, like post hospital, and the morgue. And I would go with my mom all the time, like especially if she had late patients that she would see, just so she wasn't alone. She would go in and see the patient and come out and I would just ride in the car. And then we would go to the lab and I'd walk in with her to drop off the blood and everything and we'd leave. And there was one night, and they always talked about how creepy it was down there to get to the lab because you were so close to the hospital and you're so close to the morgue. And so I always walked with my mom to go in. And there was one night that I did not walk in with her and I was sitting out in the car and it felt like it was taking her forever. And I really had to go to the bathroom. And so I was like, there's bathrooms right inside the hospital. Like I'll just go to my mom and then she'll take me to the bathroom. And so I got out of the car and it's super creepy. Like you had to pull down under the hospital, like literally where they would come and the funeral homes would pick up bodies and all of that kind of stuff. So it's already kind of sketchy. I remember getting out of the car and going in, and I knew where the lab was, but you had to go down like the old hallway to get there. And like the floor was even different. It wasn't even like the new tile. It was like this older style tile that they kept in there. And I remember hearing footsteps with me, but like not my footsteps. And I just assumed like somebody had walked in behind me, like, and obviously as a kid, I was like, okay, they're coming to get me. So I like take off running down this hallway, and it is freezing cold, like freezing cold, until you hit a certain point in the hallway and the temperature totally changes. It like flips back to normal. Like it's not frigid. And so I took the turn, made it into the lab, and got my mom and had her take me to the bathroom before I could go out. But when I turned to go into the lab, there was no one in the hallway. Like there was no one chasing me. There was no need for me to be running. And everybody will still, like, I even was asking my mom about it this morning, because I was like, everybody felt the temperature. Like everybody, it felt that it was frigid cold. And then you would just hit a certain mark, and like it was the same place every time. Like once you got to that spot, the temperature was normal, and it didn't matter summer, winter. It stayed that freezing cold temperature until you got to a certain spot in the hallway.
Gosh. So, okay. How old were you again?
Oh, I was probably 10.
Okay. Oh man. Nora was like, who is this kid?
What are you doing alone in the hospital? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh gosh. So, crazy.
But then you can see, like, if Nora's hanging out there, and I know, like, obviously lots of people have like had encounters with her, but there were so many deaths and just so much even in that area that like it does make you question the footsteps. Like, are they all Nora? Or if you don't see them, is it Nora? Like, it gets kind of creepy.
Well, yeah, if anyone's in that area of Georgia, or even if a travel nurse is, you know, taking an assignment out there, like there's so much history, there's so much to learn. Check out that campus. You can also check out the Chickamauga and Chattanooga area. Those were created into the National Military Park, and that was established in 1998. The next episode next week, we are going to have Karen Andreessen and another recruiter, Erica Bradford, on here. And we're going to talk about the Crescent Hotel, which is in Arkansas. But for a very brief time, it was a quote unquote cancer treatment center where a lot of the patients didn't necessarily get better. What are you doing for Halloween? Do you guys have any like traditions or anything that you like to do?
So we actually used to always go camping with the kiddos because campsites are the most fun, we found out. So if you do have an RV and you're in a park, like those people need an extra thank you, because they do extra and like make it so fun. But that's what we normally do. This year, we haven't booked a spot. We also have stuff like here local. We have some big neighborhoods and things that we like to go hit up that give out, you know, the full size candy bars. Those are always the good ones. But my little boy's birthday is actually this month. So we're fixing to take a trip to Stone Mountain for their special pumpkin lighting and all of the stuff that they do. So may do a little celebrating early before we hit up the trick-or-treating.
Perfect. Sounds good. I will have to think about going camping sometime over Halloween. That would be fun. Thanks, Jessica.
Can't wait for next time.
Yeah, I love it.